Hey there. So I uploaded a video earlier and then I didn't realize that those red colors were all in it in the video, and then I was driving so it was making a lot of noise. So I decided to let that video go and just re-record again. And I want to talk about something that's not really important right now, but it's like I spend so much attention on myself and being serious and the things that I have to do to work on myself that sometimes I need to get my mind off just a little bit on something else that don't have to do with me, and then come back to it. Okay, because it's like you got to be a child. Being serious all the time is not really, in my case, going to necessarily get me to where I'm going. Because the more serious you get, the more into ego you tend to get, and then it's harder to reach your destination, reach your goal. So sometimes I take a break from myself a little bit and talk about things that's really not relevant today. It could be relevant for some people, but to me, from what I realize what's going on, it's really not relevant. But I want to talk about something I was watching, right? So I was listening to this guy. He was talking about, I think, what was it, in the 90s or maybe something, he was having a conversation with this guy. And this guy was talking about how, specifically in the brown community, which might be any community, but he was, because it was two brown men, they just talking about the brown community. He said specifically in the brown community, you got to be careful who you have children by because of the genetics and stuff and how they could turn out, right? And basically saying you just can't be having children by any old person. Somebody who don't want to do anything in life, somebody who just don't have any motivation, somebody who don't want to be a provider, somebody who might hate women, somebody who could be on the down low, could be doing stuff and not telling you about it, anything like that, right? And this is something I already knew, but when I heard this person, I was listening to something earlier today, and I felt like talking about that. I said, yeah, that's something that, most people seem to know, but it just don't seem to, once again, I'm going to talk about part two of how the condition of the female in the community, the condition of the female determines the condition of that community. Okay? This is like kind of part two of that. And so then he gave the example. At first, this guy said that he was kind of arguing with this other man. Somebody, don't get into all this genetics and stuff like that. Don't be getting all this. But then he ended up seeing for himself on his own with I guess, a woman that he either knew or heard about, who she was, I guess, married to this down low male. And I'm going to tell you something. I'm from Tuskegee, Alabama, even though I live in California now. But I'm from Tuskegee, Alabama, and I'm going to tell you something. Many of those guys are down low, and I'm not talking about no millennials or Generation X. I'm talking about them baby boomers and that silent generation. Many of them are down low. Because I hear women talk about sometimes, or people in general, not just women, people in general talk about, why can't people be like they were back in those days? How were they back in those days? Because growing up in that area, it's a lot of homosexual men that tell on these guys, talk about the stuff that they do and having sex with these guys, and these guys are in marriages and have kids by these women, and these men right now, they would probably be in their 70s or 80s right now. Okay? So how good was it? Or maybe because things was kept quiet and hidden, and it just gave the idea of looking like a tight family. That's what people want to go back to. You basically want to go back to a lie. I mean, at least what you see right now is just how things have. It's a result of the problems that was existing even then, but it wasn't showing up like it is now. See, now it's just showing up with everything that's just going on with the music and the crack and all that stuff and everything that's been introduced in the community. And now the illness is just really coming out. It's like you, and I'm gonna get to what I'm talking about, the genetic thing. But it's like you say, like somebody drinking alcohol, or somebody dealing with somebody else who kind of brings something out of them. People say they blame it on the alcohol that they might have done this, or they blame it on being around somebody else that they might have been this way. But the only thing that person could have done is pull something in you that was already deep down in you in the first place. And same thing with alcohol. Alcohol is just like you lose your inhibitions and you do certain things, but like if you say crazy stuff out your mouth that you wouldn't say ordinarily, It's just pulling stuff out of you that was already buried deep that you had enough sense to know not to say when you were sober. And then when you're drunk, you lose your inhibitions and you say everything that's been on your mind and blame it on the alcohol when it's really something that's always been there. But you had your mind was together. You weren't drunk, so you were able to keep it a secret, right? So my point in saying this is just about that community. And so this person, this male was this brown male was talking about how this woman was married to a down low man, okay, and he was proving that case that the other man was trying to tell him about genetics in the brown community, and talking about how he hated women. He hated women. Now he'll do anything for a dog on another man, and anytime another man called him and want him to do something, he'll do something for that man, but he won't even go out and turn off the light for his wife. If a light is on in the doggone hallway, he'll get her to go turn it off. He won't even go to turn off a light in the hallway, but he'll go, if a man called him, want him to drive all the way to Timbuktu, he'll do that. And actually, I've seen that a lot now that it's just been allowed to be public with homosexuality. I've actually seen how it's okay for a male to want to provide it in another male because, I used to live in Palm Springs and I lived in Los Angeles, and plus I used to drive Lyft. And so I got a chance to hear men talk. And it was no problem for them to find a provider. They were never accused of being a gold digger. There was no problem for them to find a provider. There was a lot of women that wanted the same thing that these gay men are getting today. They complain, and the women wanted more basic stuff than a lot of these gay men get from their mates, their partners. So that just lets you know that there's a problem, a dislike for the female. Okay, there's a dislike for the female, and it's just based on lies. And so what this guy was talking about this woman ended up having a baby by this down low male, right? Who probably was her husband. And then the boy turned out being just like that, turned out being just like that. And so that's when he said he was proven wrong when he wanted to argue with that guy about not getting into genetics and all that stuff. And then he finally saw for himself, said, yeah, it does make a difference. So you see somebody breaking in liquor stores and doing all this stuff and just wearing his pants around his ankles and all this stuff, and you want to call yourself giving somebody a chance and not judging him. You don't have to judge him. You ain't supposed to judge him. That's not your job to judge his life. But that don't mean you need to give him yourself. That don't mean he needs to have access to your womb either. And I think that's where the confusion come in. You don't have to judge them. But see, let me tell you something. This is where the brown women, a lot of brown women, just have been brainwashed. Because here's the thing. The degeneracy of the brown community, period, when I'm going to talk about the male. Not that I really care about getting the male together and getting him right. I don't care about that. But I'm talking about how the degeneracy among the male was pushed in, really hardly in media. And does not mean that people cannot make their own decisions. But what I do know, just living my life, what I see right now, people tend to follow the crowd. They don't use a mind of their own. They follow what's popular. That's just what it is. That's what I see in the world. You see that in any culture, they follow the crowd. Most people don't use their individual mind. Okay? So regardless of what they can say no, they can say yeah, they can, but most people don't do that, and most people are under mind control. Okay? And so, you had this pimp called Iceberg Slim that was pushed, I guess, in the 70s or whatever, and then you had this movie called The Mac with Goldie, and so you had a lot of, and even in the Old Testament, I don't know why people don't want to talk about that. There was a huge hatred for women that I saw in the Old Testament of the Bible. For some reason, even women don't want to discuss how it seemed to be a hatred for women. And it was a masculine principle. Every time talking about somebody beget somebody, somebody forget somebody, it was always a male. It was never a daughter. And it's for some reason, women, I guess they saw through it, but they didn't want to bring it up. I don't know why. But anyway, there was a degeneracy of the male that was really pushed very hard in the brown community. Okay, so you had the Iceberg Slim, and then you had the Goldie. So you had that pimp culture that was pushed really hard. I saw a lot of '70s movies that really pushed that pimp culture hard, right? The blaxploitation film, okay, and then around the '80s, that's when you get into the gangster rap and then this degrading of brown women and degrading of the community anyway, degrading of the community, and then you get into a lot of crack, and then you get into what it was a lot of gangs, okay, a lot of gangs and gangs violence, okay. So what happened was there was a heavy image of the black male or brown male that was pushed just to be a degenerate, right? And a large portion of them turned out to be that way. But here's what happened. And a large portion of brown women turned out to be degenerate too, but I'm going to talk about that. So, brown women were often told to not try to expect the brown man to give him to do what the white man can do. You know, a lot of times when it seems like when brown women just want the basics, the necessities, just a basic provider, don't even really ask for much. She's accused of wanting him to be like, I guess, like the white man, because most of what I was seeing in the brown community, she didn't even get the basics of what she was asked for. She was called a gold digger, and she barely got the basics and barely get any money for her children. But for some reason, she's called a gold digger for asking for $5. Okay, and so when brown women are always brown women, and that's not to say there's not other brown women that's a piece of work. Don't get me wrong. There's other brown women that's a piece of work. But from what I've seen in the community, and what anybody else can see, brown women don't seem to have standards, and they don't seem to have a lot of self-esteem. That can't even be argued, because everybody in the world can see that. That can't even be argued, regardless of what other brown women want all this money and want all. For the most part, for what the world sees amongst the brown community, the brown women in America, most of them don't have standards, and that's just what the world sees. So who cares about the few that's a gold digger? They don't matter, because they ain't really seen like that. Because a brown woman was gold diggers like that, the community wouldn't look the way it was, like the way it looked. It wouldn't look the way you wouldn't have people that couldn't hardly drink some clean water. You wouldn't have babies going to school that can't hardly get no nice books. You wouldn't have that had brown women really were gold diggers like people want to say they are. You wouldn't have a community that looks like that. Okay? And so what I'm saying is that she was often told, and you see this through a lot of movies. You see this through a lot of black movies, brown movies. That's mostly brown cast. You see how this brown woman is always some kind of professional. But it's always advertised to her to date down, to marry down. They say it don't matter. And I actually heard a brown male say this. I won't say his name because I don't want to get into dogging nobody out. That's not what this is about. Yeah, and I want to make it clear, this is not about dogging anybody out. This is not about attacking the brown male, and it's not even about attacking the brown women. It's just talking about the genetics, how genetics and who you choose to have a child by, which, you really shouldn't have a child by anybody right now with the thing that's going on, if you know what's really happening, right? If you know what's besides somebody threatening to take food off the shelves. I mean, if you really, really see what's going on, really, really know. You always see these women who's professionals in these movies. They could be, be a president of some kind of firm. They in a corporate. A lot of times they show these women in corporate America that's real successful. These brown women in these movies, and then what's in the movies is shown for her to give a chance to the brown male and not worry about him having making the same kind of income or higher that she's making. So it's always been pushed, even throughout media, for the brown woman to not necessarily be hypergamous, to not care about money like that. Okay? And so what happens, and then I brought up this last time with the gangster rap music and the music with the lyrics degrading women. And I brought up C. Dolores Tucker in my last upload about how she tried to stop that because that was going to ruin the future generations. But you had a lot of brown women. First of all, a lot of brown women in her generation didn't even want to have her back. So it doesn't matter how popular somebody is. It doesn't matter what kind of voice somebody has. If you don't have a number of people that can have your back, then it doesn't even matter. And you know what? I don't care how popular I am. If I don't have anybody who can have my back, I'm not doing anything for anybody, for any group of people, because something is wrong when people just say one person can just do everything by themselves, because you don't see that amongst other groups of people. They stand together, but amongst the brown people, when people try to get something done, it's like they have to kind of be by themselves and get it done, right? And so I didn't see much of support behind C. Dolores Tucker, even from the women in her generation. But definitely the women in Generation X is like, because they was kind of groomed to that music and kind of grew up listening to that music at a very young age, they didn't want that kind of music to stop, even though it was degrading them. They didn't understand that it was degrading them, because that was the music they were introduced to at a very, very young age as a child. So they didn't understand the damage that music was really doing, because that's the music they were born to, right? And so what happened was you had other women who, when C. Dolores Tucker wanted to wage a war against gangster violence, you had other women like from Generation X defending this male, defending his right to degrade her. So I like that music. I like that music. I saw a Generation X woman talking to C. Dolores Tucker like that. It was like some kind of press conference or something. And I saw her on the microphone talking to C. Dolores Tucker like that. I don't know how old she is today. She's probably in her 50s now. Probably looking back at that, said, I was a fool. Probably looking back at that and saying, no, she was a straight fool. But she didn't know at that young age, because you're born to that stuff. You're born to disrespect, and you don't know it's wrong to do it. Okay? And so, yeah. And so what happened was the women helped the men to fight for the right to dog her ass out on radio, talking about he needs to express himself because of all of this oppression and white supremacy. Okay, and like I said in the last upload, okay, fine if he has a problem with white supremacy, but what's his problem with the brown woman? Or just the female, period? He seems like he's degrading the female more than he talk about white supremacy. So who does he really have a problem with? Okay? But people for generations and generations wanted to go along with that. And then you got the females, how they looking today, how people are complaining about them today. It's everything that C. Dolores Tucker was trying to fight against when she wanted to go against that gangster rap music. I don't care. That gangster rap music did worse than crack. Even though crack did a number on people, and still does a number on people, that music being played worldwide like that every single day in the community, because every single person in the black community wasn't on crack, right? Even though crack did a number on the community, every single person was not on crack. But guess what? It was like 99% of people in those communities that listen to that music, though. Okay? And so what happens if you have a generation of men that they're growing up to that music, and they're growing up with that pimp era, with the first start, with Iceberg Slim and Goldie and all that stuff. And so they learned since the 70s and 80s to pimp out women. Okay, so now you have that starting off, and then they get them more into sports. It was a time, and during the 40s and 50s, and it seemed like 60s, it seems like the brown male, it was popular for them to be studious, right? It was popular for them to own businesses, and like Black Wall Street, and like even with Dr. Martin Luther King, people can talk about he like white women all he wants to, but that's not what I'm talking about. It was popular for brown men to be studious, like Dr. Ben, like John Henry Clark. It was popular. It was popular for the brown male to present himself in a professional way. Even Bobby Hemmett, okay, because because you had the Deborah Blairs of his time and the John Henry Clarks of his time and the Dr. Ben's. Bobby Hemmett looked like he was an outcast with the way he talked, right? But you see him today, it's not that bad because of the generations that came after him. We used to that stuff by now. It don't make no difference to us. But with those other baby boomer generations, and then Bobby Hemmett, that was around the time he was out there too, and he sounded like he just was out there with his language, But even with that, even with Bobby Hemmett, the point is, it was popular for the brown male to be studious, to be smart, right? To be studied, to be well researched, to be just well groomed. And then the image of degeneracy was pushed on the brown male, and I don't care who has their own mind and whatever decisions they can make on their own. The point is the majority of the world, not just brown people, but majority of the world, they are on automation. They are on mind control. They are controlled by the masses. They do what they see the masses do. They don't use their own mind because there is a fear of being rejected when you use your own mind, and that's just the world in general. Okay, so there was a image of degeneracy that was pushed on the brown male, and it worked. And there was an image of degeneracy that was pushed on the brown woman, and it worked. And so, the point I'm making to end this is that then you have generations of people that continue to have babies, and then the generations just continue to get worse and worse and worse because nobody wants to see that this is a problem. There was somebody that wanted to come out with a book called No Wedding, No Wound, right? Well, I'm going to call her name. I'm just going to, you got to give people credit. It was Crystal Carrison, right? It doesn't matter if I'm a fan of hers or somebody else a fan of hers and don't like her. But Crystal Carrison came out with this book called No Wedding, No Wound. And I think, what's her name? I forget her name because I haven't watched her channel in so long, but it's another lady I used to listen to. She talks about relationships a lot. She's an older woman. She's like probably in her 60s now, maybe, probably her 60s. But anyway, Crystal came out with this book called No Wedding, No Wound. And when I tell you, it seems like, from what she sounded like she explained though, it seems like the brown community kind of understood it until a white woman got a hold of that book and wanted to go off and say, you don't tell these brown women what to do with her vaginas and her womb or something. I think I heard Kristen say that. And so when this white woman want to call herself defending the black community and going off on Kristen Carrison, talking about you don't tell brown women what to do with her, you don't tell people what to do with their wombs. Then the whole community, I think, decided to get behind this white, not the whole one, but majority, decided to get behind this white lady that was going off on Crystalline. And they went off on Crystalline for saying no wedding, no wound. Basically, to stop the degeneracy that's been happening in the brown community. I mean, now getting married is not necessarily a solution, but what it is you can start by setting some kind of standard for yourself. Because what was pushed on the brown community, whether it was a brown male or whether it was a brown female, it was like a message of the black people should have, or brown people should never have any standards in life. They should never want anything out of life. They should never want anything that's not rat infested. Like, that's the image that was pushed to brown people, just to never want anything in life. So even if marriage is not the answer, the point is that what I get from her intention for that book is for brown women to learn how to set standards. Because it starts with the woman. It starts with the female setting standards and taking charge of her womb instead of just letting anybody impregnate her and then having children. And so just by having a culture of degeneracy, because after the Iceberg Slim stuff, then you had the gangster music, and a lot of basketball was pushed. I think it was a lot of basketball that was pushed, like late 60s, 70s. A lot of basketball was pushed. So it was pushed for the brown male to just want to be a basketball player, a football player, or a rapper, right? Something like that. Okay? So that was heavily pushed. Okay? Not to be the John Clarks or the Dr. Benz of those days. Okay? But to be a rapper, a basketball player, a football player, or something like that. Right? And so, and so because of that, the brown woman, instead of her really setting standards, because honestly, with that Generation X, to be honest with you, she didn't really understand to set standards because that's all she kind of knew. But this is not to make an excuse for her. But still, she didn't know what kind of standards she was supposed to set because she thought that's just how a man was. That's just the best that she was going to get. Okay, being born in a time where you don't see better. Okay, and so a lot of brown women, you have a generation of brown women that get with those guys and have a bunch of babies by them, and then they never learn to set standards, and then that generation don't understand anything about standards, and then get people to come along to tell the brown woman to have standards, to tell the brown woman if she wants somebody, look for a provider, and all of this stuff. Then it's like a lot of pushback because this cancer has been going on for too long in the community, and so now when you bring it up now, it's a major pushback. Okay, it's going to take a lot of work, and to be honest with you, a lot of people don't look like they want to change, even though they understand everything that people are saying. There are a lot of brown women understand the point of setting standards, but at this point, a lot of people don't want to change. And it's just got to let that go, But I was just wanting to just bring up the point of, when I was listening to this guy having this conversation with this other male about genetics in the brown community and who you have a children by determines the outcome of that child too. Like, it really matters what kind of character he or she may have too. So the brown male needs to be looking into what kind of woman that he's or female that he's, because they get young girls, but a lot of young children, a lot of young ladies were getting pregnant in my generation, getting pregnant at the age of 13. Okay, and so even the male need to look at who he's impregnated. Okay, but still, the point is that the brown community was never taught to set standards. The brown woman should have been taught at a very early age, that she needs to look for certain things in a man and not to just have a baby by anybody. But that kind of teaching was never going around in the brown community, and I know that for sure. Oh, that was her name, Deborah. Her name was Deborah something. But she has a YouTube channel, and she talks about a lot of relationship advice. I haven't watched her in a long time, but I think her first name is Deborah Cooper. That's her name, Deborah Cooper. So I think she tried to come out with some kind of thing about that. I don't know if it was a book, but she tried to come out with something about trying to get the brown women to make better decisions on who she dated and who she married and who she had children by, and they gave her pushback too. So Kristen is not the only person they did that to. The brown community was just too comfortable with being degenerate, but they didn't want to try to do the work to change themselves for the better. See, the point is they just did not want to put in the work to better themselves, the male or the female. And I'm talking about the collective, not a few people that do want to work on themselves. I'm talking about the collective, right? They didn't want to put in that kind of work. They wanted to be comfortable in their degeneracy. And so you continue to have generations and generations and generations of people and children that's just going down, and that's just like they seem to get lower and lower and lower and lower in consciousness, lower and lower and lower in vibration, when they really should be much higher. Because like after Generation X came that crystal generation, they should have been real high in vibration. Generation X was mostly that rainbow. After Generation X, I guess that was called the millennials. I'm not sure what they were, or were they Generation Y. I'm not really sure. But either way, after that, you had that crystal generation that came in. And that particular generation should have been on a much higher vibration than all of the generations before that. Even though they're young and they were babies, they would have been more advanced genetically. They would have been more advanced because they were part of the crystal generation. But because it was so much degeneracy that was allowed in the black community, and the girls wasn't taught to respect her womb, and she just got pregnant by anybody who wanted to get her pregnant, right? And then there was an image of a pimp and just aspiring to be a basketball player and football player and being a rapper that was pushed in amongst the brown men. And then no matter that, those children that came in as crystal children actually became even more degenerate. They became even lower in vibration, when really they were some of the more ancient ones that was coming in. The more ancient ones that came in. The ancestors. Those were the ancestors coming back. But they were coming back and they were going to be a crystal generation. But because of the brown community and them being so low in vibration and low in mentality and low in their mentally enslaved, I think the world is mentally enslaved. Let me just say that though. The brown people is just mentally enslaved in a different way. But I think the world in general is mentally enslaved. Okay? So I don't make no excuses for the world, period. See, when I upload these videos, I'm just talking about the brown community because that's just what I know. I don't talk about white people. I don't talk about the Arabs. I don't talk about Hispanic culture and Asian culture because I'm not around them enough to really and even if I am, I'm not interested in even talking about them. Even though they got their ways too, and I think they're mentally enslaved too, just in their own way. Just because they have money doesn't mean they're not mentally enslaved. So I think the whole world is mentally enslaved in different ways. But I just talk about the brown community because that's where I'm from. That's what I know. That's how I grew up in Tuskegee. So definitely I know the brown community, you know. But anyway, yeah, I just felt like bringing that up because I just kind of heard a guy talking about it, and yeah, definitely, the brown people, they were never taught to look at genetics when it comes to mating. I saw an interview that the Universe Guru has. This lady with a YouTube channel called the Universe Guru, and somebody else was interviewing her, and she talked about how in their community, actually hypergamy is not even a thing in their community. They just automatically know to marry a provider. They automatically know to have a child by somebody who's a provider. It's like the hypergamy, that word don't exist in their community. It's just like the word organic. Like people use the word organic in the United States of America, but that word doesn't even exist. When I went to India, that word doesn't exist. When I went to Israel, that word doesn't exist. And same thing when I looked at this lady, the Universe Guru, and when she was having an interview with somebody else, she said that word hypergamy doesn't exist because the women already know to mate with somebody, marry and mate with somebody who's a provider, who is motivated in life, and look at other characteristics too, not just being a provider, but other characteristics too, right? Because if they're a provider, but they hate women and they want to beat the mess out of women, then you don't want to marry that and have a child by that, because then your children going to come out, they're going to have those traits too, because it's still in genetics. So even them having money, if they have some ways that you don't like, you know, still be careful with that. But definitely don't mess with no male, especially in a patriarchy. Don't mess with no male, marry or mate with a male that can't be a provider in a patriarchy. Not only because he's not providing for the family, but your offspring is it's passed through genetics. And I'm glad to hear that it was two brown men that was having this conversation, because it seems like when a female wants to have a conversation, it seems like she's wrong for it. But it doesn't matter who thinks that she's wrong. She has a right to respect her own womb. She has a right to choose who comes into her Stargate. She has a right to choose who comes through her Stargate, because she's basically a portal. The women are portals. And so they have a right to choose who comes through there. You know, no matter who thinks that she's wrong for being choosy, she has a right to choose. The brown woman was not taught the same thing these other women were taught. And so now people come along trying to tell them, and they want to fight them on it. And I just say, don't say nothing else to them. The ones who don't want to listen, and the ones who do want to listen, you just take those aside and you talk to those and you teach those. But for the masses of them that don't want to listen, just let them go, because the majority of the brown community it's already sunk. It's just a matter of them just not being around anymore. But the community is already sunk, because you cannot have that mentality among a mass group of a community in a critical mass like that and expect the community not to sink. And there's no need in being falsely positive about that. Okay, it's already sunk, and it's only a matter of those bloodlines coming to an end. That's just how it is. It's only a matter of a lot of those people just going completely extinct. Now, some brown people are going to be around, but it's only going to be a few. It's only going to be like literally it's going to be a small number, and I think that might be around the world. Okay, but anyway, that's all I want to say though. And honestly, I just felt like talking about this to get my mind off of myself and off of worrying about stuff that's going on. And I'm not talking about like as far as material wise. I'm talking about as far as spiritual wise. Being so worried about other things that's going on, because that actually makes it a lot worse. It's like this right here is almost like It's kind of like going to the movies, right? How you go to the movies and take time for yourself. So me just uploading this, doing this upload, is not necessarily, it's really not that important. Let me tell you why this don't even matter no more. Because at this point, if people really understood what's going on right now, nobody should be having any more children around this time. If they really knew what was going on, they shouldn't have any children around this time anyway, and try to raise them up in this climate. With was I guess was still being pushed. I don't even know what's being pushed anymore. I decided not to tune in and constantly look at somebody else's narrative and their plans for my life. I decided not to tune into that anymore. So honestly, I don't know what's being pushed. But be that as it may, people don't need to be having no kids, no matter what race, culture they come from. People don't need to be having no more kids, no way, in this kind of climate. Okay, even if they stay in a nice neighborhood and got money. It ain't even about you having money around now. What's going on right now is spiritual. It's not even about having money. It's spiritual. And most people say it's spiritual, but they don't know they're the ones being attacked. Like, yeah, this is a spiritual battle. You don't understand that you're being directly attacked. Because you're comfortable with your job, you're still able to get paychecks, and you're still able to pay your mortgage or your rent or whatever you're doing and drive your car. You don't understand that you're still being spiritually attacked. That's the subtlety in it. Because if you knew right away somebody's attacking, like somebody come and punch you in the face and you feel it right away, you know that person don't like you. You know there's a fight on your hands, right? So the way this attack is done is very slowly and subtly. And by the time, I don't think people are going to figure it out because I think it's too late for them to wake up. A lot of them, was what happened. I think it's too late for a lot of brown people and people all around the world. I think it's too late for them to wake up to what's really happening. And it's not always about this fall of Babylon that I guess folks want to talk about. I heard somebody bring that up because I don't look at a lot of people's channels and I don't even see what people are uploading. But I guess because this queen died and because of this whole thing that was pushed, they talking about the fall of Babylon. I don't think they understand what Babylon is. Babylon is beyond this European male. Babylon existed before that. Okay? So when you talk about the fall of Babylon, like I said before, people better be really sure on what they getting excited about when they say the fall of Babylon, because it's not about the United States of America and it's not about the white man. Okay? That existed way before the white man. Okay? But yeah, Babylon is falling, but it's not what people think it is. Okay? And Babylon is actually already fallen because what we're seeing now has already been done in the spiritual realm. So honestly, it's already fallen. We're just seeing it take place within time. But it's already fallen because it was already done in the spiritual realm. The spiritual world is the real world. So it was already done. It's already fallen. It's just taking time to manifest in time. Okay? And the whole world is just about to be turned upside down. That's why I say it ain't no good idea for nobody to have children right now. Whether they got money or whether they poor, it's definitely if they poor. But even if they got money, with everything that's going on now spiritually, even if you got money, it might not be a good idea to have a bunch of little ones. But if you're already pregnant or already got some little ones, okay, well, you can't reverse that. So it's no need. I'm not trying to make nobody feel bad, but I'm just saying it's probably best to stay away from that right now. You know, I was just wanting to have a little conversation about something I heard and I felt like talking about it and get my mind off myself and the stuff that I'm dealing with. Anyway, I'll talk later.